Welcome to another Tales from a Professional Nerd. My name is Bryan C.P. Steele, and I will be your nerd today. Today's a crazy day. As if you can't tell, my hair is all over the place. I need to shave the sides of my head again soon, maybe even trim this crazy, not mohawk mop thing that's happening. I didn't shave today. I have been so busy because cool things are afoot. I can't. I know I'm probably being loud, and you're probably like adjusting your headphones, and you're like, "Yeah, YouTube's going crazy." I am heavily caffeinated. A, B. The last couple days have been amazing. Not only is the Shadowrun novel coming along great and coming to a close, but work on Spycraft is starting to gel together really well. I just came up with a whole nother wave full of miniatures for the Warzone game that I have to send out to Alex. And this is the week in Bryan, but you're going to kind of get in a stream of consciousness style because of something really cool that I'm going to talk about a little bit when I can. Had a meeting with I had mentioned that I was working on a high sci-fi game for a clandestine client. And we had our first big meeting kind of after he had a chance to take a look at the system. Hopefully, I think he's happy so far. And we are already looking into kind of what's the next step over there. Like I said, it's just been crazy. There is a very good possibility I may have sold a board game engine and a card game engine to a former employer of mine. That we've been chit-chatting back and forth about it. No money's changed hands or no contracts have been signed yet or anything, but like I said, it's been a really good couple of days. And then there's one other thing that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But I got to play good D&D last week, where we had a nasty fight with kind of the mid-level baddie, sort of like she was our kind of sub boss that we were dealing with. Kind of if it was a video game term, she was like the mini boss. And after it was done, in that game, my character is having a pretty moral dilemma. Because the way that the background traits and everything panned out for this chaotic, good, dancing cat monk, he's got kind of a Batman complex where he wants to do right by the world. He wants to squash injustice and defeat the bullies because when he was little, when he was a mere kitten tabaxi, he was bullied quite a bit and is trying to set, the fact that he survived in that atmosphere. He's trying to give back to karma, to the world, to the universe. And unfortunately, one of the party members that we're with, is troublesome. Troublesome would be like with italics. He is problematic. Like killing prisoners problematic, stealing from everyone. Everybody should die if they've ever if they ever stood against him. He's a loudmouth to people that should be able to just squash him like that. And as a player, you're caught in that weird situation where he's another player character, and so you want to try and make things work so the game moves forward smoothly, but everything this guy is doing just makes me want to see his character just die a grisly death, and that the rest of us stand around him going, "Hey, you brought this on yourself." But we had a really cool role-playing moment after our target, this mini boss, got accidentally killed during the combat. Kind of in the middle of the combat, we still had a bunch of cleanup to do with like little thugs and things, and no one got around to healing her. No one got around to saving her. She ended up just dying in the middle of the combat, and there was a lot of money to be had there at the scene. And my character had a very brief moment where he was like, "Oh, hey, we're supposed to bring her back alive. We've got all this money. We should resurrect her. We should bring her back." and then bring her back alive to the people. And it was a really cool role-playing moment because, again, the troublesome character is like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. They're just going to kill her again anyway, and you're wasting your money, and I'm not going to stand for it. And then everybody else was like, that is kind of a waste of money because they're going to just execute her when they get her. And although this might make your conscience feel better, you're bringing her back from what might be her afterlife, her treasured rest, as it may be, just to be tortured and killed. That seems almost maybe worse than just bringing the corpse back to these people and saying, hey, she died in the combat, there's nothing more we can do. And it was just a really cool moment, and I like moments like that, which will actually feed back, will actually feed into, it'll feed into today's topic, because today's topic is flaming dice. No, it's so this is actually the AC10 shirt, my t-shirt sponsor. I like this shirt because it is very, it's just, check it out. It's a flaming D20. It's an excitement shirt. It's a role playing is cool, and there's no significant oh, hey, there's like big words, fireball across the way, or I rolled an 8, and 8s are cool. There's nothing like that. It's just basically a shirt that says, I'm a role player, I'm jazzed about it, rock and roll, enjoy. I like rolling d20s, and actually, that's not even necessarily a role playing thing. I could wear this when I'm doing playtests for Warzone because it's a d20 based engine. Back in the day when I was playing and designing a bunch of Dark Age, d20 based engine. So this shirt has multi-facets because it has no words, and I like it. And I think that Warzone players should go to armorclass10.com, and find this shirt, get it in their faction's color, and make sure to use my discount code TFAPN, Tales from a Professional Nerd, and you'll get a discount on the shirt, and you should get it, and we should wear them when we play in Warzone, and it'll be fun. Again, heavily caffeinated. You may need to play this back at a slower speed to possibly understand half of what I'm saying. What the hell? Alright, so I mentioned that there was one other really cool thing that happened, and by happened, I mean I started recording this episode, and my email dinged, and I saw who it was, and I had to stop and re-record the beginning of the email because it didn't speak to what had happened in the email. So I cannot say yet. Hopefully, I believe the company involved is going public next week with this, and once they go public with it, I can go public with it. But I have just been attached to a role-playing game project that is hopefully a chain of projects that is probably, I don't want to say, I'm not going to say problem. I'm going to say if this chain stays connected and I am involved with the whole project and I don't make anybody mad or screw up my side of the work, which of course I won't. I'm a professional nerd, damn it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Do it. The project is, no, okay, Brian, stop, take a drink. I know it's got caffeine in it, but take a drink. Slow down. The project is not only cool, like it's just a cool project, but it, like I said, it chains together with a couple of other projects that, by being part of all of them and being part of this process, it really does. There are some boxes in my professional, like if I had a professional bucket list, if that makes any sense, like, these are things that I want to get done, these are things that I want to do, these are things that I want to accomplish. There would be a couple of them, a couple of what I'm signing up for on that bucket list, and I signed that contract this afternoon. So it's a deal. I'm gonna be part of this project, and believe me, as soon as I can talk about it, I will. because it's huge. It is for someone like me, it is huge. And because the company is awesome, and because all of the people I work with are awesome, it's not going to get in the way of anything else. I might need to work a little harder and maybe have a few fewer video game nights where I'll be working instead. But for something like this, it is absolutely worth it. Not only the people I get to work with, I've never worked with these people before, and I'm super excited because they are awesome. They're awesome people. I don't want to use the term giants in the industry, but their names are very well known. So it'll be nice to be on a project with them, not for recognition, just because it's cool to work with people that I've seen their stuff. I know them through conventions. I know them through working acquaintances. Oh, we both know this person and we've been at the same party or something along those lines. But this is going to be really neat. Like I'm more than a little psyched, as if you couldn't tell. And then on a completely separate note, completely side note, where was I going with this? Oh, my TikTok, which I'm at the professional nerd on TikTok. I have been trying desperately ever since I got involved with this thing. And, there's people on there that have tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of followers, and they use it as their income stream or whatever. That's not what I want. What I want to use TikTok for is I want to be able to go live. Instead of doing all these little 1-minute clips. 1-minute clips are fun. They're cute. They're nice check-ins. They're commercials, sort of. But I want to be able to go live to be able to actually answer people's questions. One of the things that I miss more than anything by being at a convention, or by the convention circuit being shut down, is I miss doing panels. I miss doing seminars where people get to ask questions about my part of the industry, or if they want to be part of it, things like that. I love doing, I actually just did a podcast this last week, which she said that it's probably not going to be ready for a couple weeks. I don't want to tell you, oh, hey, it's going to happen tomorrow. But I'll let you guys know when it does become available, or when it's going to become available. But I just enjoy talking about aspects of the industry that sometimes get overlooked, especially if someone's trying to peddle their wares. I mean, I hate to say that, but a lot of times in this industry, there's always Kickstarters going. There's always that my most recent product that needs to get taken care of. All this, that, and the other thing. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to go, hey, what do you want to know? What is your what is your question for someone who's been in the industry for 20 years and been through every aspect of this industry at least once? Because I mean, I hate to say that, but I have. Between marketing and warehousing and ordering and sculpting and painting and commissions and freelance and staffing and the whole 9 year management, brand management, project leads, footstools. It's I want people to be able to ask those things, and that's exactly what going live on TikTok is about. Sometimes you go live and explain something cool that's happening. Other times you go live and you just basically go, oh, hey, this is a Q&A. What do you guys want to talk about? And that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to go live. And I had a silly video. I was feeling crazy, over caffeinated, and kind of silly like I am right now. And I did a little goofy thing about there's a problem with the TikTok algorithm of people it's called like spamming, which is they go through your videos and they basically so like, and what that does is that it interacts with the algorithm and tells the algorithm that people are only watching your videos for like 2 seconds, and it gets pushed down deeper into your videos must not be worth watching, so they don't come up in the cycle as often. That's basically how TikTok works, is that they want people to interact with your stuff multiple times, but they want your watch times to be long as well. And so what I did is it did a little stupid commercial that was basically like, hey, don't spam like, but like spam. And I had a little can of spam because I like spam. And I had spam for breakfast this morning. I won't say I went viral, because viral is like when you open your phone and the next morning it's like, oh, 10,000 people have seen this. But it's been hundreds of views since I made it last night. And that's a lot for me, for my small little, audience. But I have gotten really close, and a lot of people have started spreading it around that I really need to get to 1,000. And so because of that, so I got really close to, I'm getting close to the 1,000, and I'm just, it's like, again, it's been a really good week. I made a reference to, well, I'm trademarking this phrase, by the way, because if I ever do an autobiography about my life, this is going to be the title, is that I was going to go back to throwing, quote unquote, throwing karmic chum to space sharks and reality turtles, because I felt as though the universe was really kind of clicking for me at the moment. Call it what you will. I'm not a very spiritual person, but things were coming together. Yeah, sleep is less important at the moment, but it's coming together, and good things are happening. I'm 43 years old, and I've always felt for the last 20 years, I've always felt that I'm going in the right direction, but I had felt that I had a few missteps along the way. A couple of places that I should have maybe swerved left instead of swerved right, or maybe taken a gig that was not necessarily as awesome as the one that as the one that I wanted, but go ahead and taking it to make the connections, or maybe pass up a gig because it's going to take up a lot of your time. So whatever the case may be, I feel like things have come together and things are going well. Everybody in the house is healthy. Natalie got picked to do a relatively local teaching gig. So we're going to see how that's going to pan out. Hopefully that will be awesome too. Extra money in the house is good. And I hate to say it, but she has felt very hamster wheel lately, very stagnant, very I'm not going anywhere. I'm retracing my steps. Maybe this, even if it's just short term and it just goes for a couple of months, maybe it'll help her get some of that self-esteem back, get some of her stuff, get things up and moving again. She's a convention artist, meaning that most of her art that we were selling, most of those poster prints and some of those gorgeous charcoals that she does, they were selling at conventions, because that's basically what we were planning to do with her company. But she does have a website, and I know I put the website address up every time, but honestly, and I don't mean to like push, but anybody out there, if you take 10 minutes and go surf through her gallery, and her prints are really inexpensive. It might be a cool present for somebody. It might be just something neat that you want to have hanging on your wall, or in a binder, or whatever. But yeah, I would swing by her website. It's the link is in the description of the videos that I do. But yeah, swing by and take a look at her stuff. She does a lot of charity work. She does a lot of stuff for other people, that doesn't pay very well, but it's really good for the soul. And it's also good for her. She's made a lot of awesome friends, with in and out of Hollywood, in and out of like social media. She's made a lot of cool friends and acquaintances, some of which I've gotten to basically become friends with because of her. And it would be nice if more people appreciated the art that she was doing. I'm not trying to guilt anybody out there, go see my wife's stuff and buy things. What I am saying is, she's got a lot of these prints, and she's done a lot of work, and her stuff is really good. And I know a lot of people out there, if you were at a convention walking past the booth, you might go, damn, that's awesome, and buy it. We don't have conventions right now, and her booth is a website. swing past, take a look, click on it, take 10 minutes. You know, what's the worst thing that happens? You surf through it and go, nah, I don't need anything. How often do we do that? Every day on Facebook. All right. So, I have ranted and talked about the day in Bryan enough because, again, it's been amazing. It's just been great. It's just been a great week. All things are wonderful. I'm super happy. I want 36-hour days, but it's been great. And I was mentioning earlier that, you know, D&D is happening. Oh yeah. I guess I'll talk about it here, and I'll talk about it next week. I just got signed up to attend, quote unquote, the Autumn Revel, which is the GaryCon the October GaryCon virtual role-playing convention. It is next weekend, 9th, what is it? Yeah, the 9th, 10th, and the 11th. It's only like $10 to get in, and events don't cost anything. So if you are even remotely interested in surfing the events and possibly sitting down at a virtual table and playing some role-playing games, I'm going to be playing in a bunch of games over that weekend. You might luck out and end up playing in a game with me. Who knows? In fact, I think I sign up for my events this weekend, which means next week's episode, I should be able to put up my schedule in case you guys, if anybody wants to drop in and play with me, play a game with me, which would be pretty awesome. I'd be super down. That would make me ultra happy. But either way, so that's next weekend. This weekend I've got my regular D&D, the Dancing Cat Monk. Stopped calling it a bard, which is good. And I was just I wanted to basically, this week's episode, the actual topic came from a conversation from, I wrote it down because it's a mouthful for us, you know, goofy Americans. Averkios Avi Karalis, I believe I said that right. Let me know in the comments if I did. But Averkios actually hit me up on Facebook. He messaged me and asked very bluntly, how do I come up with characters, believable NPCs, characters that are more than just cookie cutters, you know, like a cardboard standee sitting off to the side. He asked how that happens, because it sounded like he was getting ready to run one of his own role-playing games, or possibly write an adventure or something along those lines, and he was just really interested in, because of the numerous people I've worked with and the number of licenses I've worked with and the number of sanctioned canon that I've worked with, that means I've had to deal with characters or add characters to existing stories without screwing up their existing plots. So he wanted my advice. He wanted to know, and I said I could go on for a while on Facebook chat, but I think that this is actually worthwhile to talk about as an actual topic of the show. And so today is brought to you by our dear friend Averkios Avi Karalis, if I said that correctly, in so far that we want to talk about how to write characters, whether it's your own player characters if you're in a game, or your antagonists if you are writing a story, or just as I like to call it, the rogues gallery, the cast of thousands that fills in the blanks around the edges. I will say this, is that there's a huge difference between making role-playing NPCs and making NPCs for a story. For a short story or a novel or a series or a comic or something along those lines, you have to kind of know how deep you want to get into this guy. Is this character more than just a walk on? You know, is it a someone you're going to see later, or are you having them walk on to tease them because they're going to show up later on? Or are they somebody who they enter the story, they stay with the story a long time, and you're going to need to flesh them out? They're more than just a couple of lines of dialogue. They're actually, you may want to give them mannerisms. You may want to give them a speech, a speech cadence. You may want to, for instance, there is a mage in the Shadowrun novel I'm working on right now that, when I introduced him initially, he was wearing a very flamboyant, just crazy mismatched outfit, the kind of thing that would, like, a homeless clown would wear. And it became, every time that I brought him back into the scene, or into the plot, every time that we would meet this character again, I would always take a moment to explain how ridiculous his outfit is. And what that has done is, the reader is now, every time this character is involved, they have a pattern, they've got a picture in their head that this guy either doesn't care what he looks like at all, or maybe specifically dresses this way because he's, you know, some kind of, like, rebel, or he wants to stand out, or he wants to be special. And that's exactly, that's the kind of thing that you want. You want to be able to set the stage for him. Now, if he was way more important, if he was a like co-star or a main protagonist, I would then, through his behaviors, through his actions, through the things he says, explain why that is. If it's a major facet of someone's life, or a major facet of that character's personality, you don't just leave it hanging because your player, your reader, your audience will probably at some point set the book down and be like, why does Clark wear a cape? Why? You know, because if you've never mentioned it, and it never gets mentioned, it's basically the white element. It's the white elephant in the room. It's, you told me he has a cape. Why does he have a cape? Why do you keep mentioning the cape? Or worse, if you just mention it once and then suddenly it just vanishes, because then it's going to fall out of their head conversationally, and then if it ever comes back up, they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I've been picturing him completely without a cape this whole time because you stopped talking about it, or you didn't mention it, or you didn't give us a reason to think about it." So yeah, when it comes to like short stories and narrative characters, it just depends on how deep you want to go with them. So one of the things that I used to give Dean Koontz, a horror writer, very popular in the 80s and 90s, I was not a fan of how he would spend forever describing someone who never shows back up in the story. It's just pages of this person's mannerisms, this person's outfit, this person's, you know, we'll peek a little bit into their backstory and be like, oh, okay, the butcher's obviously important, and then they leave the butcher shop and you never see this guy again. That makes me crazy as a writer. I'm not saying that you can't do it. Maybe it's a fault. Maybe it's a pump fake. You know, maybe you're like, this is a super important person. I was just kidding. You know, but it makes me crazy as a reader, and it makes me crazy as a writer to think that you've spent all of this time just elevating this guy and sculpting him beautiful out of all of this narrative marble and polished him, and he's perfect, and down to the fact that he's got a scar on his thumb from the time that he learned how to use a lathe as a child. And then you're going to put that sculpture in a closet, shut the door, and never go back to it. Blech. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. So, you know, if you want to go that way, rock and roll, That's your bag. That is not my style. You can. I don't want to like highlight. I don't want to highlight like stories because you get some of you may read my books. But one of the things that you can tell, generally speaking, is the more descriptive, the more interacting, the more, especially if there's any backstory involved, but the more fleshed out a walk-on role is, the less likely it is that it's just a walk-on. That you may herald back to it at some other time. Or possibly if it's in a series of books or series of short stories, it's possible that I could be setting things up for a future event. That's also something that's possible. I just try not to spend hours and hours writing about something that's not going to matter at the end of the day. When it comes to role-playing games, however, making NPCs, it's a similar situation in the fact that I want to make sure that my NPCs are not just throwaway, oh, this is Farmer Ted, he has a pitchfork, and then as soon as you walk into the door of his barn, it is utterly blank, I know nothing about anything else of this guy's life. Or when a player asks him something and you go, he has a cousin? I'm not saying that you need to flesh everybody out completely, but you do need to have a general idea of what you want to do with someone and be able to improv it at least a little bit on the fly, because unlike a short story and novel, which you as the writer are guiding everything, in a role-playing game, you can never know what's going to happen when your players interact with these people. Yeah, sometimes you get the murder hobo that's just going to be like, oh, the farmer, I set him on fire. Well, whatever. You're playing your own game. But that doesn't mean that they were like, oh, the farmer, I think it'd be really cool to have to have a romantic tryst with this guy because you mentioned he has no wife. So let's go ahead and I'm going to set this up because that way when we come back to this town, we'll always have someplace to stay because I've got this romantic, this intimate thing with Farmer Ted. And if as a dungeon master, as a narrator, a game master, whatever you want to call it, storyteller, if you don't know how to handle that, if you don't know how to, maybe as soon as the player mentions to you, one of the other things, and I'm gonna digress, tangent. One of the other things is that as a dungeon master, never, or a game master or storyteller, I'm going to use DM as kind of the general term. Never, ever, ever be afraid to look at your player and ask why. Because it isn't that, maybe it's not that you're trying to stop them from doing it. It often is. But it's because you're just trying to make sure that they're not just doing stuff to do stuff. Their characters should have reasons for doing the actions that they do. If they don't, then they're sociopaths and they're just doing whatever comes, I'm just going to do this thing. Let's burn the orphanage down. But when someone says, hey, I start getting a little warm on Farmer Ted. I ask to see if I can make him dinner tonight. As a DM, if you haven't figured out, just through inference or through the things that your player has said, that they're trying to basically turn Farmer Ted's homestead into a base of operations here in that town, if you haven't already picked up on that, there should be no hesitation for when you look at that player and go, hey, why are you trying to score with Farmer Ted? And if the player's response immediately is, well, why should I not? Let them know that you're not trying to put them on the defensive. You're not trying to tell them that they can't, have a Farmer Ted love tryst in Middleshire. What you're saying is you want to know why, because you don't want to waste half a session, have a game session where the rest of the players are basically like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to hang out with the pig while you're scoring with Farmer Ted. Or if it's not that important as a plot point, where it becomes the opposite, where you can look at that character and say, hey, while you are cementing things with Farmer Ted, I'm going to deal with the rest of the party with the other things that they're going to do. It allows you to prioritize just how important this is. Never be afraid to ask why your characters are doing something. And because again, as the storyteller, as the narrative, as the DM, you're the background noise. You're the information. You're the notes between the lines. So if the player has some kind of reason for doing something, they should not hide it from you. They should be able to tell you their reasoning for doing it. And if they are hiding things from you just because they want to try and surprise the DM later, that's going to end up probably poorly, because you've got things set up in your game. You know what you want to do with these plot lines and these characters in this sort of general storyline that you guys are all collectively telling, but then one person's playing their own game, that one person's they're doing their own thing. They're not really telling the narrator what's going on until it's too late. And I think that sometimes a surprise, again, if it's not a major thing, like just, oh, this guy did a thing, interesting. But for most of the time, you can plan around what's happening with the party. You can mold and adjust your storyline. You can massage certain NPCs. You might create this NPC on paper and he is a hardcore, just a cultist through and through, loves his god more than anything else. You say word one against about any other god, and he spits on the ground. And then when the players get there, you decide to soften him up a little bit. Maybe the players have had kind of a rough morning. The last thing you want to do is hit them with a sledgehammer of this super pious, crazy zealot guy. So you tone it down a bit. Maybe instead of being fire and brimstone about his god, maybe he's more, hey, my god says, welcome arms, come on in, let's take care of you. We'll talk about, over the campfire, we'll talk about why my god is super cool, but we're not gonna vilify you for not being a member of my church or whatever. You've got to be able to have some flex to things, but that flex should happen before the interaction or during the initial interaction. The last thing you want to do is introduce this guy as this fire and brimstone zealot, and then on the next time they meet, you've decided to change gears and he's no longer the fire and brimstone, and now he's more warm and welcoming, because I guarantee your player characters are going to think he's a doppelganger, or it's a trap, or he's possessed, or he's been mind controlled, or something terrible is happening. And what the terrible thing that has actually happened is you were lazy and you changed your character. You changed your character's core essence without any real reason. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about, anytime that I write down a player in one of my many role-playing game notebooks when I'm running a game, is it's a rule of 3. Every single character that they're going to interact with more than once, if it's just the valet at the bar, say what species he is, say whether or not he looks trustworthy, if they even ask, and maybe give him a name, jot down a name, or just call him the valet, because you're never really gonna interact with him again, aside maybe from getting your carriage. If it's somebody like that, don't worry about it. But if it's somebody like the bartender in the town that they will frequent, I mentioned Middleshire earlier. If there's a tavern in Middleshire and they go there often, maybe have a wench or two, or a waiter or two, or a bartender, or maybe the town drunk. Have a couple of people that will help set that stage every time into a familiar place. But any of those people that are that way, you make sure that you always give them How many? Rule of not 1, rule of not 2, but 3, rule of 3. You give them 3 defining aspects. If it's somebody who's super quiet, like the town drunk who's always unconscious in the corner, well, hell, always unconscious in the corner. That can be one of them. 2, he wears expensive clothes. 3, he mumbles. He mumbles in his sleep. Boom. He mumbles when passed out on the bar. Those 3 things is enough for someone to know immediately. Okay, the drunk in the corner. I know I can picture him on set if this was a TV show. I could picture him on set, and it also gives your players something that they might be able to work with. He's always there. One, that means he's always there and he's always drunk. He's probably a great source of information, but that information might be a little iffy because he's drunk. 2, he's extremely well dressed. When he's not here and he's not drunk, maybe he's a noble. Maybe he runs in higher circles. That's the reason why after hours he comes back and drinks himself into a stupor. 3, mumbles in his sleep. That could be something super useful to seed plot points. To he's laying there, swamp witch. He said something about a swamp witch, and now the player characters can research and go and look something up. It could be a great way for you to drop information, or tie all these things together. Maybe he is a juror at a local trial. And that's why he's dressed really nice, because he keeps having to show up at the box for this guy, and then when it's done, because it's just a trial of a trial, he comes back and drinks himself numb because he doesn't want to think about what they've had to talk about all day. And while he's murmuring, you hear just a bunch of not guilty. No, he didn't do it. He didn't. Is it guilt? No. It was the goblin. There's ways for you to use this singular NPC, those 3 facets. But you do the rule of 3. The way I do it is, and their name does not count. Naming someone does not count as one of their rule of 3. The rule of 3 are descriptors. And so if there's a barmaid, it could be the rule of 3. Helga the barmaid. Rule of 3 is she doesn't drink on the job. You can never buy her a drink. In fact, she gets adamant and angry about it. She is sober as a stone, so maybe she's a good source of info. She was married. Her husband is missing. He went away to go, maybe to be an adventurer, and that could be something that she holds against other adventurers. Like the adventuring party comes in, everybody can tell, oh, you're just coming through, going to bring a bunch of trouble with you, and maybe Helga really just treats them like dirt right off the bat, and finally someone goes, what did we ever do to you? Why are you spitting in our stew? And she's like, my husband was just like you. He went away to go, to go save the Duchess's niece and never came back. Not only does that help personalize that NPC, but it also gives you something to jot down that, let's say that 10 sessions from now, they're in the house of the Duchess, and you introduce them to some local guy who saved her niece, and you go, wait a minute, don't you have a wife in Middleshire? In Middleshire? And he goes, oh God, does she think I'm dead? She needs to think that I'm dead. Whatever. It gives you reasons to, again, flesh out your world just a little bit with just a little kind of on the cuff decisions based off that rule of 3. Great physical descriptors. Now, I don't count, unless it is striking, I don't count just being pretty as, oh, this guy's pretty, or this guy's ugly, or, that's weak. Because, again, it's also very eye of the beholder. Somebody who maybe doesn't like elves, is kind of not big on elves, isn't going to find that elven beauty enthralling. In fact, that just by saying, instead of saying that the elf is just a beautiful elf, you say she has extremely defined elven features, very high pointed ears, very sharp cheekbones. The skin is extremely fair. The hair is silky, which again, to another elf or to someone who appreciates those features, that could be something that is just like, oh my god, she's the image of beauty. But to someone who's like, ugh, elves, that's going to be a different reason to have that being one of those rule of 3 plot points. Unless it's someone who is going to be a major part of your plot, an NPC that hangs out with your group, the bad guy itself, like the big bad evil guy. You should definitely flesh him out more than just his stats on a page, or her page. I should make sure there's lots of big bad evil gals. Even if it's a monster, make it more than just a monster. If like your local plot line ends with like the big bad being like a group of trolls, like a group of trolls have been like sneaking out of the swamp and stealing people or whatever, maybe make one of the trolls, you always hear, I hate to say this, the NPC fish stories. Nobody's ever caught old Wayne out of the pond. That thing's a 7-foot long mackerel with one eye, and he's still got the hooks in him from the first 12 times he's been caught. That's an NPC fish. I hate to say that. Yeah, you're not going to... I mean, you could, in theory, interact with the NPC fish. Maybe like a druid turns into another fish or talk with animals or whatever. But that's going to add just enough flavor to a scene by them describing good old Wayne, In the case of the bad guys, maybe one of the trolls is a foot taller than the rest. Or maybe has, because of weird regeneration, weird issues with regeneration, he's got like a third arm that just kind of hangs lifelessly by the side off of his ribs. He's just got he's got like a floppy arm. Something that can make him stand out even more as more than just, oh, it's the troll that we have to kill, or whatnot. And I think that's what really makes NPCs of various kinds and breeds, whether it's plot intensive, antagonists, protagonists, player characters that you haven't really gotten the feel for yet. Give them those rule of 3. Now, something like D&D. D&D 5e is really cool about having the different backgrounds, and it's got like the different ideals and bonds and flaws and things you can roll for randomly to help you set up a personality if you want. That kind of replaces the rule of 3, in my opinion, when it comes to a player character. But if you don't feel like rolling random, if you don't feel like going through and doing all of those things and having the game dictate sort of your background, instead, why don't you go ahead and do your own rule of 3, where you're like, okay, this is something that stands out about my dude, this is something that stands out about my dude, this is something that stands out about my dude, and you would be surprised if the first time that you get a character group together, unless they made their characters all at the same time as a group or something like that, like the first time you get a player character group together, explain the rule of 3, be like, hey, there's 3 parts of your character that should be immediately apparent, or within hanging out with you for a little while, and it's something that helps define you to the group. And so you can go around through your player characters and go do rule of 3, blah 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 blah. If they're having a hard time coming up with it on the fly, do rule of 3, but do it one at a time. So by the time he gets around back to the first player, hopefully he's thought of a second thing to explain to the group that they've noticed since they've been together or whatnot, to help flesh out these characters. And that more than anything, that is what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to basically eliminate unnecessary mystery. The last thing that you want is just blank space when you're having a role-playing moment, when someone is super deep in their character and they're pounding things home about this dilemma or this thing that they want to do, and then they look at someone and go, help me out here, and that player goes, I don't really know what my character would say. What? No, that's your character. You should know because you've created this. And I think that that's more than anything, more than any rule of 3 or rule of 5 or plots and flaws and bonds and all the things you can roll for, is especially if it is a player character. If you are a player, there is one person you have to worry about at that table. One person's story, your character's story, your background, your story, the reason why you're doing things. It should not be, you should never, in my humble opinion, and I know I'm getting kind of heated about it, you should never look to your DM and say, why am I here? Your DM should have earlier already talked to you about why you were there, and that should be one of your things. That should be your character's spiel, is this is the reason I'm involved with everything around me. It shouldn't just be a random crapshoot of, well, it's because I made this character and I sat down at the table, that's why I'm here. No. You take a few minutes, you discuss things with your DM, you discuss things with the rest of your party, especially if it's a interwoven party that has existed together for a while. Whatever the case may be, there is no reason why your DM should be telling you. Your DM could be helping you flesh things out. You could say, oh, I'm here in this town because I'm hunting down the man who wronged my daughter. The DM can help flesh that out. That, oh, it wasn't a man, it was an elf. And it wasn't a local elf, it was a wood elf from the far north. They can help you massage those facts and turn it into more of a story. But you shouldn't, when a player goes, hey, Henry, what brings you to town? Your first instinct should not be to look at the game master or the DM and go, yeah, why did I come to town? That's a symbol of lazy storytelling and not a fully thought of character. Now there are instances, I know I'm getting a little hot about it. There are instances where your player character that you've designed, the story is kind of irrelevant. And I hate to say that, but like a lot of convention games, one-off games that you've never, that if it's one where you get to bring a character to the game, then your background probably doesn't matter, because he has the dungeon master has a story to tell, whether it is she wants to get you guys together and make it a thing, or if they want to role play everybody meeting in a tavern, lazy, or whatever they want to do. That's up to them. But when it comes to the actual game itself, more than likely they've already got it planned out, so your background is less important. If it could be really cool to be able to role play a bunch of this cool stuff during the course of the session and wow your neighbors, and they're like, damn, you really thought a lot about this dude. But when it comes to the actual setting of the stage and making things work with the DM, probably not. They're more likely in a convention or a one-off type game to just sort of wave you in, be like, yeah, okay, this is a thing that happened. Which is one of the reasons why when I do convention games, normally I like to have all of the characters already made for everybody, so their backgrounds do matter. And then I make sure that in their background packets that it talks about that. And so they've got effectively their rule of 3 plus more than likely, in that packet, so that way they have everything that they need to play this character to the best of their ability. And that's something that I think that people should do, especially if it's a game that they're making their character for this game specifically. Don't be afraid. Just like as a dungeon master, that you can never be afraid to ask your player characters why. During player creation, or during character creation, a player should be able to look at a DM and say, "Hey, help me make my guy fit your story," because it's going to be 1,000 times easier over the course of the game if that character already sort of fits into the overall thing, instead of being just this crazy third wheel that you sort of shoved in at the end and said, "Nah, it's good enough." And I think that's the penultimate example is, unless it's an NPC that really the character just doesn't matter. It's a walk on, it's a walk off. I paid him 2 copper to watch my horse, or whatever. You maybe give them a name or leave them ambiguous unless something happens that makes them more. Don't waste your mind power and your note space and things on every single person, because you'll spend most of your game spending notes, writing notes, and you're trying to keep up with everything, and you'll miss the game session. You'll be like, "Oh, my session's over. What happened? I'm still writing down the things about the guys in the bar." You don't want to go that route, but you still want to be able to be involved enough that should they decide to go back to that place, or they recall that person, that if it's going to be an important thing, that you have a little information and you have a way to make it part of the story, part of the flow of things, because session flow and story flow is very important. When it comes screeching to a halt is when you start losing your players, where they, I don't know if I can't speak for your group, but I know a lot of times that's when players reach for their phones, check their Facebook, when they've been removed from the plot, when they've been removed from the story at the moment, or they're dealing with something that is just so cardboard and so two-dimensional that it's effectively a pause screen in a video game. This guy's dealing with dealing with the merchant over there. All right, I'm gonna check my Facebook. You want everything to be part of the scene, unless, of course, it is something that is supposed to be super minor, like buying stuff at the shop. Everything doesn't have to be a huge, deep, monstrous scene unless you want it to be. You could totally have a guy who's like, "Hey, I just need to buy a couple shields at the shop," instead of going through this giant description of everybody inside of the shop and the shopkeeper, and you have a big long back and forth with the shopkeeper, negotiating your wages or negotiating your costs, and then eventually he makes one shield but he doesn't have a second one. It's this big super deep thing, because the rest of your group is probably twiddling their thumbs while you're dealing with this extremely in-depth business transaction. If it's just going to be a transaction and it's not going to have a plot relevance, then just do the transaction. Be like, "Hey, he can do 2 shields for 50 gold. You're pretty sure that you might be able to negotiate him with a persuasion check. If not, it'll be ready in 2 days." And then get back to the main plot. Get back to the stuff that's going to keep everybody going and everybody happy. So yeah, I know I ranted a little bit and I raved a little bit about things, but I hope that helps. For me, when it comes to characters, is you set their priority. You set, are they a walk-on? Are they forgettable? Are they important? Are they someone who's going to come back in the future? And depending on their level of importance, you set them you set a level of attention to detail that you want to give to them. How much of a side plot conversation, or how important is their background to what your players are doing, or how important do you want it to be? Because that ultimately, that is up to you as the storyteller, as the creator of these characters. If you don't want your player's background to be important, then it won't be. If you want him to be, I'm just a ranger in the woods, I'm just like every other elf, that is one of my defining features. I am a elven ranger. I do ranger things. I have a cat. And I love the woods, or whatever. That's up to you. You can be that sort of flat and cookie cutter. That might be what your character's thing is that he is super stereotypical until something happens in the story that makes you not. That's not my way of doing things, but that could be the way. That could be yours. Whatever you want to do, as long as everybody's having a good time and nobody's like bummed out or bored or making things bad for anyone else at the table, then you're doing a good job. Your characters are fine. I just think that one of the things that you need to remember is not everybody needs to be an encyclopedia entry. And if you are going to take time enough to work them into the story even a little bit, you got to realize that you're going to need at least a little bit more information when they get back into the story or the player characters start actually talking to them about other stuff. That's kind of my tips on that is if you want to make characters believable. I don't know everything about my mail carrier, but I know a few things. And if I want to know more, I can ask. And that's pretty much it. My mail carrier to me is an NPC. I know that sounds weird, but I know a few things about her, and what I know is pretty cool, and if I really wanted to dig a little deeper, I could. She is not a piece of cardboard behind a counter. And that's really what's important. The guy who sold me my McDonald's yesterday, cookie cutter. Could be a cardboard cutout behind a window. Because he's not important to me. I hate to say that. He's important to someone. He's important to in the role-playing game setting of McDonald's world. He's definitely important. He's one of the player characters. But in my story, don't need to waste the time on him. Does that make sense? Unless, of course, I decide to make it important. And then my storyteller needs to go, okay, let's figure it out. That's all it takes. As long as everybody's having a good time. Speaking of having a good time, what I want everybody to do this week is to go out there, stay safe, do whatever you need to do to make sure you have a smile on your face and you treat other people with the respect that they deserve. But then go out there, have fun, and play some games. See you next week.